We live on an ocean planet. A world 3/4 covered by water. A world of unexpected beauty, unparalleled adventure, and unyielding delight. Your ticket into this world is diving, and there's nothing like it. Diving experiences range from heart-pounding intense to not a care in the world tranquility, with lots in between. And it's all your choice. Diving takes you to some of the most lush, exotic destinations known. But you can go underwater practically in your own backyard. Diving opens the door to so many different activities and places that where you dive and what you do while diving changes as you do. The PADI Open Water Diver course is more than a scuba curriculum. It is the process of growing into something new. A certified PADI Open Water Diver. When you look back, you'll remember the PADI Open Water Diver course as much more than learning to use scuba gear. You'll remember it as your story of becoming a diver. Welcome to the PADI Open Water Diver course. Successfully meeting all the course requirements earned you the PADI Open Water Diver certification, the world's most popular and recognized scuba credential. This is important because diving has potential hazards you learn to avoid, because it has risks you accept, and because what you learn allows diving to be rewarding and meaningful. Dive centers, dive resorts, and dive boats require certification before you can rent scuba gear or have a cylinder filled. As a PADI Open Water Diver, you're trained to dive with a buddy to a maximum depth of 18 meters, 60 feet, or the deepest depth reached in training, in conditions comparable to those you train in. If you complete only the first 3 course sections and first 2 open water dives, you may be certified as a PADI scuba diver and trained to dive with a certified professional as deep as 12 meters, 40 feet, in conditions in which you have training or experience. The PADI Open Water Diver course has 3 parts: knowledge development, confined water dives, and open water dives. Knowledge development covers principles you need to know for safety and for diving enjoyment. During the confined water dives, you'll learn scuba skills with your instructor and practice applying them just like you will in open water. You make the open water dives with your instructor at real dive sites suited to beginning divers. During these, you'll practice and apply what you've learned in knowledge development in confined water. There are 5 knowledge development sections that correspond to 5 confined water dives and 4 open water dives. Your instructor has a lot of flexibility in sequencing and will go over the schedule with you. All PADI programs use performance-based and student-centered learning. These mean you progress by demonstrating you meet specific objectives. The course and materials emphasize helping you learn in the ways that work best for you. Having the skills and knowledge you need are what's important, not how long it takes, so you progress at your own rate. You must meet all the requirements for certification, but it's not a race. Student-centered learning means you progress at the pace that suits you and how you best develop ability and confidence. It's important to complete the knowledge developments in order, including the exercise questions and knowledge reviews before each session as your instructor assigns. Look and listen for the answers to the learning objective questions as you study. When you meet with your instructor, speak up about anything you're having trouble understanding. To get the most from the confined water dives, think of them as practice dives, so do everything just as you would in open water. Avoid habits that don't apply there. For instance, the ocean doesn't have a side to hang on to, so use your gear to stay up, not the pool side. Develop good habits because when you have a problem, you tend to do what you do by habit. During instructor demonstrations, note the details he emphasizes because they help you do the skill well. If you don't understand why you're learning something, ask. Finally, tell your instructor how you feel. He can only be certain that you're reasonably comfortable and confident if you speak up. Let your instructor know if you want more time before moving on. And it's your responsibility to postpone diving if you don't feel well or are ill or injured until you're back to normal health. When it's time for your open water dives, prepare based on your instructor's recommendations. If you'll be diving from a boat and are prone to seasickness, see your doctor or pharmacist about an appropriate motion sickness remedy and show up adequately fed and rested. Pay close attention during your instructor's briefings. Do your part in planning each dive and speak up if you don't understand something. In learning to dive, get the pros at your PADI resort or dive center to help you choose your equipment. You can't dive without gear, and there are hundreds of options and features for each piece, with new models coming out all the time. Your local PADI Pro keeps up with the latest gear and can help you choose the best kit for you, your budget, and the types of diving you like. As you'll learn in more detail, you'll have to try on most equipment to find the right fit. Your PADI resort or dive center is the place to do this, with a professional there to help. Ideally, do this soon so you can learn to dive in your own gear. Equipment you choose with professional guidance usually has the best possible fit and the most comfort, and that adds a lot to your learning experience and enjoying diving after you're certified. PADI builds instructionally valid courses based on established instructional system design and educational psychology. Because of this, your PADI Open Water Diver certification may apply toward collegiate learning. The listed organizations offer college credit or credit recommendations. See your PADI instructor or visit PADI.com for more information. Your PADI instructor is a professional who is qualified to conduct PADI training. To reach this leadership position, your instructor has successfully completed a series of required PADI courses, including the Comprehensive Instructor Development course, followed by independent tests in the 2-day instructor examination. PADI dive centers and resorts are independent professional operations dedicated to meeting your diving needs. Visit your dive operation online and in person for help in choosing gear, gear servicing, dive travel, and staying plugged into the diving lifestyle. Going from learning to dive to being a diver means getting involved with the diving lifestyle. Although you're just starting the course, you'll enjoy diving more and stay involved if you start thinking now about what you want to do after the course. There's no need to wait. Get involved with the PADI Diving Society, Scuba Earth, and the Dive Club at your PADI resort or dive center. Look into the special interest courses that you can take after finishing this one, like underwater photography or using special dive gear. Plan a dive holiday. Pick out your first scuba kit. Join in your local dive operations Project Aware, Aquatic World Awareness, Responsibility, and Education efforts. Project Aware unites divers globally in activities and actions that preserve and protect the underwater world. Do any of these or all, or something else, but begin your next steps as a diver now. That's the key to making your PADI Open Water Diver certification the start of new adventures instead of merely the end of a course. One of the great things about being a diver is it's something you can do all over the world, in lots of environments. During your PADI Open Water Diver training, You'll learn the foundational skills using the gear a beginning diver needs in your local environment. But different environments may call for different techniques or equipment. So, when diving in a new environment or at an unfamiliar site, get an experienced local diver or instructor to give you a Discover Local Diving orientation, a guided dive, or some additional training, whatever's most appropriate to the ins and outs of diving there. Especially as a new diver, you'll find it helps you enjoy diving more because you know where to look for the cool stuff, the right gear, and techniques to use and how to avoid any hazards unique to the area. And it's a great way to meet other divers and make new friends. When you visit someplace new, get local information from a PADI pro who knows the area. People differ in their strengths, talents, and limits, and PADI courses accommodate these differences. This opens diving for many people with a broad range of physical and intellectual capabilities. You must meet the performance requirements to earn your PADI Open Water Diver certification, but there are many ways to meet the same requirement. This is where PADI's student-centered approach makes a difference in meeting individual needs. For example, most divers may meet the requirement to enter water that is too deep in which to stand by stepping in with all their gear on. A diver with limited leg use, however, might meet the requirement by rolling in backward or pivoting in sideways from a seated position. So, if a suggested technique doesn't work for you, you and your instructor can adapt or create techniques that meet the objective. It's exciting being a diver because underwater, you experience new sensations. You feel pressure, swim almost weightlessly, and see and hear things differently. These result from the different physical properties that water and air have and relate directly to your safety and enjoyment as a diver. Right now, you're surrounded by pressure. It's the weight of the atmosphere of air. We call this 1 bar or atmosphere. When you go underwater, the water adds to this pressure. 10 meters, 33 feet of water adds the same pressure as the 1 atmosphere of air. So, the pressure increases 1 bar or atmosphere for every 10 meters or 33 feet you descend. Increasing pressure doesn't affect water, but it compresses a gas, like air. So as you go deeper, pressure reduces an air volume and increases its density by pushing the molecules closer together. This pressure-volume density relationship is important because it affects air spaces, including your ears, sinuses, lungs, and mask. It also affects controlling your buoyancy and how long your air lasts. As shown here, there's a relationship between the pressure and a gas's volume and density. At 10 meters or 33 feet, the pressure is twice the surface pressure, so half the air volume remains and the density doubles. The same relationship applies when you ascend. As the divers ascend, the gas re-expands so it's full of air at the surface. But what would happen if the divers inflated a balloon and sealed it at depth, then ascended? The air would expand and burst the balloon. To prevent this, the divers must keep the balloon unsealed and release some expanding air as they ascend. This is a very important concept we'll return to shortly. As you descend, water pressure compresses the air in your body air spaces. When descending, this primarily affects your ears, sinuses, and mask. A squeeze is discomfort caused by the imbalance between the water pressure and the airspace. A squeeze can injure you if you continue to descend. But you can prevent a squeeze by adding air to air spaces to balance the pressure. This is called equalization. Equalize your ears and sinuses by blowing gently against your blocked nostrils, or by swallowing and wiggling your jaw. Blow through your nose into your mask to equalize your mask. Equalize frequently as you descend before you feel discomfort. You shouldn't ever feel pain. If you can't equalize, stop your descent. Signal your buddies or the instructor. They can't tell that you're having difficulty unless you do. Ascend slightly and try again. If you still can't equalize, discontinue the dive and try another day. Continuing to descend with unequalized airspaces can lead to serious injuries. A cold or allergy that causes congestion can make equalizing difficult or impossible, so don't dive until you're well. Equalize gently. Never attempt a forceful and/or extended equalization. A forceful extended equalization can cause serious, permanent ear injuries. Earplugs create an airspace that you can't equalize, so don't use them while scuba diving. Increasing pressure may affect other body airspaces. It's rare, but an airspace can form under a tooth filling and cause discomfort. There's no way to equalize this, but your dentist can correct it. A dry suit holds an air layer around your body that compresses. You learn to add air to equalize it when you take the PADI dry suit diver course. Air expands as you ascend, and normally exits your internal ear spaces, mask, and sinuses without doing anything. But expanding air can be a serious issue related to your lungs. Using scuba, your lungs are at normal volume at depth. If you were to hold your breath and ascend, expanding air would overexpand and rupture your lungs, much like it bursts a balloon filled and sealed at depth. For this reason, the most important rule in scuba diving is to breathe continuously and never, ever hold your breath. Even small depth changes can cause lung overexpansion injuries. If you hold your breath, lung overexpansion can cause severe injuries, including paralysis and death. Medical treatment requires a pressurized recompression chamber, but diving commonly takes place several hours from such chambers. But while lung overexpansion injuries are very serious, they are also very easy to avoid. Breathe continuously and never hold your breath while scuba diving. This way, during ascent, expanding air escapes without issue. If you don't have your regulator in your mouth, exhale a slow, steady bubble stream so you don't hold your breath. Also, never dive with lung congestion, which has some risk of trapping air in your lungs and causing overexpansion injuries. It is rare, but some body air spaces may have a reverse block. This means expanding air can escape. Diving with a cold or allergy can cause a reverse block, but again, you shouldn't dive with a cold. Gas forming in your digestive system can cause some discomfort if it doesn't pass. And an airspace under a dental filling may, again very rarely, cause one. If you experience a reverse block, stop your ascent. Descend a meter or a few feet or so, and give the trapped air time to work itself out. Then continue your ascent more slowly. As you've learned, as you go deeper and the pressure increases, the more a gas volume decreases. This means that the deeper you are, the more air each breath uses from your cylinder. So the deeper you are, the faster you use your air. Because the air is denser with depth, it takes more effort to breathe. Take slow, deep breaths while scuba diving. Pace yourself and avoid getting winded or out of breath. If you have a problem, stop and maintain or restore slow, deep breathing. As a scuba diver, 1. Breathe continuously and never ever hold your breath. 2. Breathe slowly and deeply. 3. Don't allow yourself to get winded or out of breath. And 4. If faced with a problem, stop and maintain and/or restore slow, deep breathing. When you put something in water, buoyancy pushes the object upward. The upward force is equal to the weight of the displaced water. Whether something floats, sinks, or does neither depends upon whether it weighs less than, more than, or the same as the water it displaces. As a diver, you primarily use your weight system in BCD, buoyancy control device, to control your buoyancy. As you descend, you tend to lose buoyancy. You add air to adjust for the change. When you come up, you become more buoyant, so you vent air to adjust. You'll discover that even breathing changes your buoyancy. It increases slightly when you inhale and decreases slightly when you exhale. By mastering buoyancy control, you enable yourself to control your descent and ascent rates, to stop at any depth, to save energy, to stay off the bottom, or to float comfortably on the surface. Recreational divers do not dive alone. You always dive with a buddy or buddies. Together, you plan your dives, help each other gear up, safety check each other, provide dive time reminders, assist with problems, and assist with the dive objective. The buddy system is important for practicality because you assist each other, and for safety because you can help each other prevent and handle problems. It's also important because diving is a social activity. You'll find diving is more rewarding and fun simply because you get to share your underwater adventures and experiences with others. Without the equipment that adapts you to going underwater, diving's impossible. So to become a diver, you need to learn about scuba gear, the basics on how it works and how to choose it. Like most divers, you'll probably enjoy getting to know your gear. You find literally dozens of makes, styles, and models of scuba gear, which is great because it allows you to choose equipment that accommodates your size and preferences. How do you know what's best for you? After you learn the basics about what your gear does and how it works, as a beginner, your best bet is to have a pro at your PADI resort or dive center help you. The gear you invest in will last years with proper care, but like all technologies, scuba continues to advance. Stay up to date with the latest innovations. You'll probably trade up over time, not because something older doesn't work anymore, but because there's something newer that you like better. There are some basics in choosing and caring for dive equipment that apply to virtually all your gear. The most important considerations in choice are suitability, fit, and comfort. Suitability means it's appropriate for the diving you want to use it for, like choosing a full wetsuit for cool water rather than a short wetsuit used in the warm tropics. Fit is important because a lot of gear doesn't work right if it's the wrong size. You get the right fit by choosing the right size. Comfort means the gear has the right feel and configuration. Properly adjusted gear that fits right is usually comfortable, but not always. If it's not comfortable, keep looking. After addressing suitability, fit, and comfort, secondary considerations include finding the cost and features that work for you, and making sure you have access to service, though dive operations almost always service the brands they sell. You can usually choose colors and styles that go with the rest of your kit. And remember the accessories that go with each piece. These little items add a lot to your enjoyment. Ask your dive professional for suggestions. Caring for your gear includes inspecting it for proper operation and for any wear or damage before each use. Never dive with any equipment that is not in good working order. Have something that's not right corrected before diving with it. After each dive, rinse everything in clean, fresh water and let it dry out of the sun before storing it. As reasonably possible, protect your gear from extended periods in direct sunlight. You'll learn that some pieces require additional maintenance and service by a professional. And follow any maintenance and service requirements in the manufacturer literature. You need a mask because your eyes must be in air to focus properly. Since this creates an airspace you must equalize, your dive mask must enclose your nose as well as your eyes. Never scuba dive with goggles because you can't equalize them. Choose a good quality mask made specifically for scuba diving. Your PADI dive shop can help you check the fit. After finding some that fit you, look for a low profile and a wide vision field. The silicone color is usually either clear or black. You often can choose from different frame colors. With a new mask, you may need to scrub the interior with a cleaner. Check the manufacturer literature. Adjust the strap so it fits snugly but comfortably, with the strap over the crown of your head. A snorkel is standard equipment for recreational diving. It lets you breathe, look, swim, and rest with your face in the water or waves without wasting scuba air, or if you're low after coming up. You usually choose your mask and snorkel together. You attach it with a clip or snorkel keeper. Get one that fits comfortably when adjusted with the top at the crown of your head. Many divers like a snorkel that flexes away when you're not using it. Most scuba snorkels have self-drain valves to help you blow out water. And many have guards that reduce water splashing in. After choosing the right fit and options, you can usually match the color to your mask. Fins allow your powerful leg muscles to push you through the water. You can choose from adjustable fins, which you usually wear with wetsuit boots, and full-foot fins, which fit like slippers. Since you don't use wetsuit boots, they're usually reserved for warm water. You choose fins based on blade and foot pocket size. Small bladed fins are suited to snorkeling, but not scuba. Be sure to get fins appropriate for scuba diving. Have a professional help you choose the right fit. Fins have options, including the materials they're made from, as well as splits and vents to improve performance. Adjustable fins may feature quick-release buckles or spring heels for convenience in adjusting, donning, and removing. Your PADI professional can help you choose from these options. Besides inspecting and adjusting them, you don't have to do much before diving other than closing the quick-release buckles, if yours have them. Get full-foot fins wet to make them easier to slip on. Regular fins aren't much use to someone with limited leg mobility, but there are other ways to get around. Webbed gloves allow such divers to swim with surprising strength. DPVs, or diver propulsion vehicles, are a fun way for any diver to be mobile underwater. But you should be able to use your legs or arms in case it has a problem. Your scuba kit is actually 4 equipment systems integrated into a single package. Your BCD, buoyancy control device, holds everything together. As you learned, you use it to control your buoyancy. Your cylinder supplies high-pressure air to your regulator, which provides it to you when you inhale. Your weight system holds just enough lead to let you descend. Its quick release lets you easily drop your weight in an emergency. We'll look at each of the systems more closely next. Scuba gear is generally interchangeable, but because everything integrates, you usually select your scuba kit as a package that puts everything together to meet your preferences. 5 components make up your BCD. It has a bladder you inflate and deflate to control your buoyancy. The bladder integrates with a harness or jacket with a band that securely holds your cylinder. The low-pressure inflator lets you use it to add air directly from your cylinder by pressing a button. You use the other button to deflate the bladder or inflate it orally. Overpressure valves are designed to prevent rupturing from accidentally overfilling the bladder. Some of these have quick dump releases you can use to deflate the BCD. The weight system pockets hold lead weights, but you can release them quickly. You have options regarding BCD features. Beyond getting the right size and fit, some have more air capacity than others. Pockets and D-rings for storing and clipping accessories come in handy. Many divers like shoulder quick releases that make getting out of your kit easier. BCDs are among the most stylish pieces of gear, and you can choose from several looks. Adjust your BCD so it's snug, but not too tight while wearing your exposure suit. Inflate it to be sure it doesn't restrict breathing. After it's set, attach an emergency whistle to the low-pressure inflator and mount the hose retainers that hold some of the regulator components. When caring for your BCD, rinse the inside of the bladder as well as the outside. Drain it, and after drying, store it with a bit of air inside. Your regulator has 5 components. The first stage attaches to the cylinder valve and supplies air to the other components. You breathe from the second stage. It delivers air only when you inhale, or when you press the manual purge button. Your alternate air source is a second stage on a longer hose that you use to share in an emergency. You'll learn about other types of alternate air sources too. The low-pressure inflator hose supplies air to your BCD inflator, and your SPG, submersible pressure gauge, tells you how much air you have. An SPG may be separate or part of your dive computer, and it may be on a hose or use a transmitter that sends air supply information to your dive computer. Ease of breathing is the most important consideration when you choose a regulator. Modern regulators meet the requirements for recreational diving, but the higher-end models usually breathe the easiest. You'll choose between the yoke system or the DIN system. Many divers choose DIN with yoke system adapters. You can adjust many higher-end regulators to keep the breathing optimal. Some have pre-dive switches that avoid accidental air release when it's not in your mouth. Besides the popular second stage on a longer hose as your alternate air source, you may opt for an alternate inflator regulator, which combines a second stage with your BCD inflator. Some divers carry independent pony bottles, which would allow them to handle an air supply problem without buddy assistance. Preparing your regulator requires attaching these components to the appropriate ports, which you should leave to a scuba professional. Regulators are robust and reliable, but have a couple of maintenance considerations. When rinsing, keep the first stage dust cap in place or leave it attached to a cylinder so water doesn't enter the air inlet. Don't press the purge button when rinsing the second stage with fresh water, because doing so could let water flow backward into it. Regulators require professional overhauls every 1 to 2 years. Have your dive center do this as required by the manufacturer. Scuba regulators are surprisingly simple. Air flows from the first stage to the second stage, which you can think of as a cup with a mouthpiece, a flexible diaphragm, and one-way valves. When you inhale, water pressure causes the diaphragm to flex inward, depressing the air valve lever. This releases air that you breathe in. When you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes, the lever rises, and the valve closes. One-way valves vent your exhalation into the water, where it rises as bubbles. Although there are variations, it is this simple design that makes scuba diving possible. Your scuba cylinder, sometimes called a tank, holds high-pressure breathing air. Made of steel or aluminum alloy, it has a chrome-plated valve that turns open and closed to enable or disable airflow to the regulator. You can choose from different sizes, and you match your regulator with respect to a yoke valve or DIN valve. Some DIN valves accept an insert so they can take yoke regulators too. All cylinders have markings stamped into the metal and labels stuck onto them with the working pressure and the dates of pressure tests and inspections. Your dive center checks these when you have your cylinder filled. You may see a cylinder with this marking, which means it's used with enriched air nitrox. You must be certified as an enriched air diver to use these cylinders. You'll learn more about enriched air a bit later. Follow these handling precautions. Don't leave a cylinder standing unattended, especially if your kit's set up. Lay it down, BCD up, so it doesn't fall. Block and restrain cylinders in a boat or car so they can't roll or slide. On boats, keep cylinders in their racks so they can't fall and injure someone or damage equipment. Scuba cylinders require pressure testing every 2 to 5 years and visual inspection annually. Have your local dive center do these for you. Open and close the valve gently and never completely drain it. Lay your cylinder down before and after diving, but for storage, keep it standing someplace it won't get knocked over, out of excessive heat. Scuba air must be specially filtered and filled with special breathing air compressors, so have your cylinder filled only at a professional dive resort or dive center. As mentioned before, your weight system's most important feature is a quick release that lets you drop enough weight so you float reliably in an emergency. Most BCD weight systems do this with 2 releasable pockets. It may also have small non-releasable weights you use for trim adjustment, that is, your balance in the water. Your BCD and weight placement determine trim, and your instructor will show you how to adjust it for a level, horizontal position in the water. BCD integrated weight systems are the most popular, but some divers use separate weight belts. Your instructor may also have you use small accessory weights to help adjust your trim. These should be only a fraction of the weight you wear, so they don't need to quick release. Let's go over the skills you'll be learning as a diver. You'll practice many or all of these during your first confined water dive. The previews you see here show you the basics that apply to most equipment and divers. But there are many ways to accomplish most skills, so your instructor may show you a different method as appropriate for you and your gear. The first skill is setting up your kit. Start by inspecting everything for wear or damage. If you have a new BCD, wet it or at least the cylinder band. This helps it stay adjusted. Slide the BCD onto the cylinder with the valve opening facing the BCD to about this height. You can adjust it later to suit your preference. Tighten and then lock the cylinder band. These vary, so get your instructor to help if necessary. Lift everything by the BCD and make sure the cylinder doesn't slip or move. If it does, tighten the band. Remove the first stage dust cap and the cylinder valve cap, if it has one. Make sure there's an O-ring and that it's not damaged. With the yoke system, it's part of the valve opening. With DIN, check here on the regulator. You can't dive without this O-ring. If it's missing or appears damaged, your instructor will show you how to replace it. With your BCD facing away from you, fit the first stage to the valve so that the primary second stage, the one you breathe from, goes to the right, and the low-pressure inflator hose to the BCD goes to the left. Secure the first stage just finger tight. Cylinder pressure will keep everything secure after you open the valve. Connect the low-pressure hose to the BCD inflator, like this. Holding the SPG away from you, slowly open the cylinder valve all the way until it stops. Check to be sure you have a full cylinder, or at least enough air for the dive. Press the purge button like this. Airflow should stop when you let go. Exhale into the mouthpiece. Exhalation should be easy. Then, take a few breaths. Breathing should be easy and smooth. If your regulator free flows or continues to release air after you stop breathing, or seems to have some other problem, notify your instructor. Next, test your BCD inflator like this. Secure your SPG and alternate air source so neither will protrude or dangle underwater. Your SPG usually comes under your left arm and an alternate second stage under your right. Attach your alternate with a quick release so that it's in this triangle area when you're wearing your gear. This keeps it out of the way, yet visible and quickly accessible if it's needed. Check that you've reconnected shoulder release buckles and loosen the waist strap. If you won't be diving for a while, say an hour or more, close the valve and depressurize the regulator by pressing the purge button. This saves your air if there's a leak you didn't notice. Depressurizing also reduces the chance of you accidentally getting into the water with the valve closed. Loosen any straps you can tighten after you put your rig on so it's easier to get into. Secure your kit so it can't fall or lay it down. On your first confined water dive, you may gear up in shallow water. But often, you kit up seated out of the water, like this. Or standing, like this. Let's go over the steps. Before getting into your kit or exposure suit, get everything else ready. Defog your mask, then adjust it, your fins, and snorkel as necessary. Your scuba kit should be fully assembled and ready to go, like you just learned. To avoid overheating when it's hot, put on your exposure suit last, just before getting into your scuba kit. Wetsuits fit snugly and take some effort. The order depends on the type. With this common style, start with the bottoms, followed by the boots, hood if you're wearing one, and jacket. Your instructor will show you the right order for your suit. Dry suits are single pieces and differ in how you put them on. If you're using one in this course, your instructor will show you how to get into yours. You can put on wrist-mounted instruments now, though some divers wait until they're in their scuba kits. If you're using a weight belt, that goes on next. Wear it so it has the standardized right-hand release. If your BCD has a crotch strap, which is not common in recreational diving, your weight belt goes on after you have your scuba kit on. This is necessary so the crotch strap doesn't trap the belt and make it hard to drop in an emergency. If possible, it's best to get into your kit seated. But sometimes buddies have to hold their rigs for each other. Dive gear is moderately heavy, so use proper lifting whenever you move it. This means bend at the knees and lift by standing. Keep your back straight with its normal curve, like this. Raise your upper chest and stick out your buttocks slightly to keep your back in the right position. Exhale as you lift. Never bend your back to lift scuba gear, or anything else that's heavy for that matter. If you have to hold your buddy's kit, support it with your strong arm and hand on the cylinder bottom and the other balancing it like this. The stronger diver usually kits up first because the diver will be wearing and holding gear at the same time. If your physical characteristics make lifting, standing, and/or walking in scuba equipment unreasonable and/or unsafe, don't do it. Ask for help as necessary, and there are plenty of alternative methods for getting into your kit. While seated or with a buddy holding your kit, slip into your BCD and tighten the straps with the weight off your shoulders. Check for trapped hoses. Then, secure all the releases and buckles. Check the cylinder height by tilting your head. If it touches the first stage, readjust the cylinder lower. When your buddy or buddies are ready, you perform a pre-dive safety check and confirm gear operation, location, and connection for each other. You'll learn the details to this in Section 2. Put your mask on by placing it against your face for a good seal, and then pulling the strap back. Develop good habits by always having your mask on in the water, even at the surface. This protects your eyes from unexpected splashes and waves, and lets you see underwater to check your buddy's gear, for instance, if you have to deal with a sudden problem. It also keeps the defog from washing out. Put on your gloves, then your fins go on last, just before entering the water. Buddies help steady each other, donning fins one at a time. Don't forget to wet full-foot fins so you can put them on easier. Avoid walking with fins on as much as possible. Put them on as close to the water as you can. If you must walk while wearing them, be cautious and walk backwards so you don't trip over the blade. Sometimes you put your fins on after you enter the water, like when training in a pool. At this point, you're ready to get in, using one of several possible entry techniques you'll learn during the course. You constantly use your BCD to control your buoyancy. Before entering, partially inflate it so you will float, say about 1/3. Inflate using short bursts, like this. You can also inflate it orally, which you'll practice. To deflate your BCD in the water, breathe from your regulator and raise and depress the exhaust button like this. Air will vent from the BCD and you'll descend. During the course, you practice using your BCD until you can stay neutrally buoyant, like being weightless, whenever you want. Release and add air in small amounts so you avoid accidental rapid descents and ascents. For the first dive, you'll use your BCD primarily at the surface. Make a habit of floating positively buoyant with your mask on, breathing from your snorkel or regulator. Inflate your BCD before entering the water, and inflate it first thing when you come up from a dive. If you have a problem at the surface, immediately make yourself buoyant. Inflate your BCD. Later, you'll also learn to drop your weight so you're buoyant. When everything's set, your instructor will have you go underwater using scuba. Your first breaths underwater are exhilarating. Breathing underwater is one of the unique experiences that makes diving special. Enjoy the moment. Breathe slowly, deeply, and don't hold your breath. Chances are, you'll never forget your first breath underwater. You can't talk using standard recreational scuba gear, so you and your buddies use hand signals. Here are some widely accepted signals, but you may learn some regional ones as well as make some up with your buddies for the circumstances. Okay or okay. Stop. Go up or end the dive. Something's wrong. Which way? Boat. Ears not clearing. Come here. Watch me. Get with your buddy. Hold hands. You lead, I'll follow. Down or descend. Low on air. Out of air. Share air. Slow down or calm down. Breathe. How much air do you have? Danger or hazard. turn the dive, or head back. I'm cold. At the surface, you use large signals that are more visible from a boat or shore. This means okay or okay. If you can only use one hand, it's like this. This means distress or help me. Your instructor may show you additional signals that apply to training. You find that you understand signals in context with what's happening. See if you can figure out what these divers are saying. You should have recognized that the trailing diver was having trouble keeping up. He signaled stop and something is wrong. The buddy replied to stop, breathe, and slow down. That is, take it easy and to catch his breath. The diver signaled let me rest a little. A little is not an official signal, but you can tell what he meant. This is normal diver communication. When your regulator leaves your mouth, it fills with water, so you'll learn 2 ways to clear it and resume breathing. The first is the exhalation method. If you have a breath in your lungs, replace the mouthpiece and blow into it. This pushes the water out. Your head needs to be relatively upright so the exhaust valves are in the lowest position. And of course, you must exhale before you inhale. Use the purge method if you don't have much air to exhale. Replace the second stage, stick your tongue against the mouthpiece to block it, and push the purge button for a moment, like this. This pushes out the water. Blocking the mouthpiece helps keep water from spraying in and making you cough. With either method, because you should never hold your breath, remember to blow a steady stream of small bubbles when the regulator is out of your mouth. It helps to make a continuous ah sound so you keep your airway open. After clearing, inhale your first breath gently and cautiously, in case there's residual water. If you release your second stage, depending upon your position, it may drop in front of you or it may end up behind your shoulder out of sight. To recover with the arm sweep method, in a relatively upright position like this, lower your right shoulder. Extend your right arm backward along your cylinder, then sweep outward like this to locate the hose. Follow the hose to the second stage, replace and clear it. With the reach method, reach back to the first stage, find where the hose attaches and follow it out like this. It sometimes helps to lift the cylinder up and to the right with your left hand. With either method, blow bubbles when the regulator is not in your mouth. When swimming, a dropped regulator usually hangs in front of you where it's easy to find. But if you ever have difficulty relocating your second stage, don't waste time trying to find it. Just switch to your alternate air source and then get your buddy to help. It's normal for some water to trickle into your mask, but it's easy to get rid of it. Hold the top of your mask, then while exhaling slowly and steadily through your nose, look upward. Your breath forces the water out the bottom edge of your mask. Start exhaling before you look up so you don't get a little water in your nose. Some masks have a purge valve for clearing. If yours does, hold the mask firmly against your face and look down while exhaling. The water goes out the valve. By the way, if you normally wear contact lenses but can see well enough without them, you may want to have them out during your training dives. But if you need them, tell your instructor and keep your eyes closed so you don't lose them when learning to clear your mask. Use your SPG to manage your air supply at all times. With good air monitoring and management habits, you avoid running out of air. so they're obviously important habits to develop. With a full cylinder, your SPG reads close to the cylinder working pressure. Pay attention to how fast you use your air. You'll notice you use it faster as you exert more and when you dive deeper. With experience, you get a feel for how much air you use. Also with experience, you'll use less air as you relax, control your buoyancy better, and move more efficiently. Note the caution zone, which indicates when you have 50 bar or 500 psi left. If your SPG is part of your computer, the display may blink or have some other alert. This is your reserve pressure. You plan and execute dives so you have at least this remaining after you're out of the water. During training, alert your instructor when you're getting close to 50 bar or 500 psi. Your instructor may ask for alerts at other pressures. During the course, you'll learn to turn the dive. That is, head back to the boat or shore, based on your remaining air supply. You learned about equalization earlier. Recall that you need to equalize as you descend to avoid squeezes. Equalize gently and often, every meter or few feet. Equalize your mask by blowing into it from your nose. Descend slowly and be patient. Do not use long, forceful equalization, which can damage your ears and cause hearing loss. If you have difficulty equalizing, stop your descent, signal your buddy and your instructor, ascend a bit and try again. After equalizing, descend more slowly and equalize more often. Never continue descending if you can't equalize. The most popular dive kick is the flutter kick. To do this without wasted effort, starting neutrally buoyant, horizontal and level, kick from the hip with your arms at your side or against your body, like this. Your knee doesn't bend much, and it's a slow, long kick. Stay well above the bottom so you don't damage fragile organisms. You may learn other kicks depending upon your preferences or to meet specific needs. This is the frog kick. Many experienced divers use it most of the time instead of the flutter kick. With proper air management, an air supply emergency should be highly unlikely. But as a diver, you'll know how to manage the problem should it occur. Were you to find yourself out of air, if possible, you would use an alternate air source, most commonly provided by your buddy. Signal out of air and share air. Your buddy responds by providing her alternate second stage, though you can secure it yourself if she doesn't. If your buddy uses an alternate inflator regulator, she switches to it and provides you the primary from her mouth. Either way, secure the alternate, clear it, and begin breathing. Grip each other's right forearms like this. This keeps you together and leaves your left hand free to deflate your BCD and control your buoyancy as you ascend. Take just a moment to get settled if you need to, then ascend at a safe rate to the surface. You'll learn to ascend at a safe rate with your buddy. Signal up to your buddy. Start your ascend by swimming upward. You should not need to put air in your BCD. As you come up, look up, reach up, and come up slowly, like this, staying with your buddy and checking overhead regularly. Breathe normally and don't hold your breath. Ascend slowly. Your computer may warn you if you go too fast. Remember what you learned about expanding air? As you come up, the air in your BCD expands, so you have to vent some to keep from becoming too buoyant. Release small, regular bursts like this. During your first confined water dive, your instructor may do this for you. When you reach the surface, keep breathing from your regulator while you inflate your BCD. Once you're floating comfortably, you can switch to your snorkel. Again, make a habit of keeping your mask on and either your snorkel or regulator in your mouth while at the surface. If you need to float in an emergency, one option is to drop your weights, especially if you don't have air in your cylinder or have a BCD problem. Never hesitate to drop your weights at the surface. Remember, you don't have to drop all your weight, just enough to float. Dropping your weight underwater risks an uncontrolled rapid ascent, so you only do it if you're unsure you could reach the surface any other way. When you practice with your instructor, first make sure no one's below you. Breathe from your regulator and simulate a BCD problem by deflating it. You may have to kick to stay up. Then, quick release your weight, pull it well clear, and drop it. You'll float right up. After surfacing in an out-of-air emergency, or if you disconnected a runaway inflator, your BCD low-pressure inflator won't work, so you use oral inflation. At the surface, hold the BCD inflator-deflator with your left hand. Inflate by blowing into it while depressing the same button you usually use to deflate. Remove your mouthpiece, kick upward taking a breath, and blow about half to 2/3 of it into your BCD as you settle back into the water, like this. Repeat this until you're positively buoyant. Be sure to release the deflator button when you're not blowing in. Otherwise, the BCD will deflate, of course. How you exit the water depends upon the environment and your physical needs. You'll probably learn and practice several techniques. The following guidelines apply to most exits. 1. Establish positive buoyancy before switching to your snorkel. 2. Remove your fins before exiting, if appropriate for the technique. This helps you avoid walking with fins on. 3. Keep your mask on and breathe from your snorkel or regulator until you're on the boat or in calm water shallow enough in which to stand. After exiting, if you didn't take your fins off before exiting, sit as soon as you can or take them off with a buddy. It's usually easiest to get out of your gear seated, though buddies sometimes help each other while standing. Remember to use proper lift techniques, and on a boat, secure your equipment so it can't fall. When you're ready to take your gear apart, start by closing the cylinder valve. Depressurize the regulator by pressing the purge. Then disconnect the low pressure hose from the BCD inflator. Remove the first stage. Dry the dust cap and replace it. Take weights from the weight system and secure all the BCD buckles and straps. Release the cylinder band and slide off the BCD. Resecure the cylinder or, on shore, lay it down. Rinse everything like you've already learned.
An experienced diver once pointed out that diving isn't something you do, it's something you experience. There's something to that when you consider that underwater, seeing, hearing, moving and breathing differ from what you're used to on land. Let's start with how you see and hear as a diver. Water is more dense than air, and this affects light. Light changes direction slightly when it enters your mask from the water, which causes about a 1/3 magnification. Depending on your perspective, this can make an object look larger, or closer, or both, though with experience, you mentally adjust for this without thinking about it. Water also reflects, scatters, and absorbs light, so the deeper you go, the less light there is. But your eyes are very sensitive. At most popular sites, you have adequate light during the day. Although you may not notice much light loss in clear water during the day, you may notice color loss. Water doesn't absorb light uniformly. It absorbs some colors before others. As you see here, you lose red, followed by yellow, green, and finally blue. Your eyes adjust for the color change, though you may be surprised at how much lost color a dive light reveals. The underwater world isn't silent. You may hear aquatic organisms, boats, divers, and other noises. Sound travels longer distances in water than in air. A boat that's too far away to hear at the surface may sound close underwater. Sound also travels about 4 times faster in water, and that makes it difficult to tell its direction. Usually, something sounds like it's coming from all around or overhead. You may be able to tell relative changes in distance by whether a sound gets louder or fainter. Because water's denser than air, it takes more effort to move through it. The faster you swim, the more energy you use. But what's the rush? Save your energy by moving slowly and steadily, avoiding rapid or jerking movements. Streamlining is part of swimming and moving effectively. You're streamlined when all your gear's secure and nothing dangles, and when you swim relatively level. As you learned in Section 1, trim is your balance in the water, ideally set so your head and feet stay relatively level in a swimming position. If you have too much weight, you add air to your BCD to compensate. This puffs it out, lifts your torso, and lowers your feet, all of which add drag and waste your energy. If you don't have enough weight, your BCD may be empty, but you'll have to kick downward to stay at depth. This puts your feet too high. You can also be weighted correctly, but have it distributed too low or too high on your body. During your training dives, your instructor will help you master correct weighting and trim. The right weight and trim make water's density work for you. As you dive, you stay neutrally buoyant, almost weightless, gliding through the underwater world. At the surface, you inflate your BCD so you float effortlessly. It's your ability to change your buoyancy that makes diving a unique experience. Normally, you'll end the dive when you're too cool for comfort, but be aware that water absorbs heat about 20 times faster than air does, so even water as warm as 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, can chill you after a while. To stay comfortable, you wear an exposure suit. A full wetsuit like this for moderately cool to moderately warm water, and a short wetsuit like this for tropical water. Use a dry suit in the coolest water. You'll learn more detail about exposure suits in a bit. Diving's not fun if you're cold, so if you get cold, end the dive and wear more protection the next time. Except in very warm water, even with an exposure suit, you'll still lose heat. The longer the dive, the more protection you wear, but even then, you'll eventually get chilled. Normally, you'll end the dive when you're too cool for comfort, but be aware that uncontrollable shivering is a sign of hypothermia, a serious condition in which your body has lost so much heat that it can be dangerous. If you begin to shiver continuously, exit the water immediately, dry off, and seek warmth. You've already learned that you breathe slowly, deeply, and continuously while diving. This is a more effective way to breathe dense air, and it reduces the effect of dead air space. Dead air space is the air in your breathing passages that doesn't reach your lungs. It's the first part of each inhalation and is higher in waste carbon dioxide. Dive gear adds dead air space. Slow, deep breaths make breathing more efficient because they reduce the proportion of dead air you inhale. It also helps you stay relaxed and clear-headed. Airway control is how you breathe past a little bit of water in the mouthpiece, which is common after clearing. The technique is to inhale slowly while looking downward. Since it's heavier than air, water stays in the mouthpiece as the air flows into your mouth and lungs. Put your tongue tip against the roof of your mouth to help deflect any water. After you get a breath, exhale sharply to clear the residual water. If a few droplets get on your throat, just cough while holding your snorkel or regulator in place. Overexertion usually results from prolonged exertion, like fighting a current, so you can start breathing faster than your regulator can deliver air. It can be frightening and may cause panic. Signs and symptoms include fatigue, labored breathing, feeling suffocated or air-starved, weakness, anxiety, headache, muscle cramping, and a tendency to panic. You help prevent overexertion by breathing slowly and deeply. If your breathing starts to rise, slow down. If you start to feel overexerted, stop all activity, signal your body, and rest. At the surface, make yourself buoyant. Underwater, hang on to something if you can, such as a rock or a dead coral. Wait until your breathing returns to normal before continuing at a slower, proper pace. If conditions make that difficult, abort the dive. Remember that when scuba diving, your breathing goal is to always breathe slowly, deeply, and continuously. As you've learned, you make and plan dives with a buddy. Dive plans don't have to be complex or lengthy, but they help you enjoy the dive more and prepare you to handle problems. Among other points specific to the dive as appropriate, a plan addresses entry and exit points and methods, the course you will follow, the maximum depth and time, a review of signals and communications, when to head back, usually based on your time or air supply, how you will stay together, what to do if separated from your buddy, emergency procedures, and your objective. You kit up together, helping each other as appropriate. Then, right before going in, you conduct the pre-dive safety check with the recall phrase, "Begin with review and friend," or any other phrase for BRAF. Begin, B for BCD. Check adjustment, operation, and partial inflation. Make sure the cylinder band is snug. Check that your surface signaling devices are in place. With, W for weights. Confirm correct weight amount and distribution, and that you can quick release and discard enough to float. Review, R for releases. Make sure all buckles and straps are secured and properly adjusted, and that buddies know how to work each other's releases. And A for air. Test breathe your regulator and alternate air source. Check your SPG to be sure you have enough air for the dive, plus a reserve. Buddies make sure they know where to find each other's alternate air sources. Friend, F for final check. Look each other over for loose straps, trapped hoses, anything out of sorts. Make the pre-dive safety check a habit. It only takes a moment, yet may help prevent close calls and accidents. During the dive, stay with your buddy or buddies. Remember that in clear water, you can be too far apart and yet still see each other. Know what you'll do if you get separated. The general procedure is to look for no more than a minute, then reunite on the surface if you haven't found each other. But in some circumstances, you may need to plan something different. When you have a 3-person team, you follow these procedures if any one buddy gets separated, even though 2 of you are still together. The buddy system works well when divers plan their dives together, pre-dive check together, stay together, and manage their air together. Remember, it's your responsibility to stay with your buddy or buddies. No one can do it for you. Managing your air supply is one of the most important dive skills. You've already learned about using your SPG. Now let's look at how you and your buddies manage your supplies together. People use air at different rates, so one buddy will always use air fastest. Throughout the dive, you and your buddies share air supply information because you turn the dive and head back based on the diver who reaches your planned turn pressure, the pressure at which you head back, first. Suppose you and a buddy dive from a boat with similar cylinders, full at 200 bar or 3000 psi. You agree on a 50 bar or 500 psi reserve. You also agree on 20 bar or 300 psi to cover your ascent and safety stop. Put that with your reserve to get the pressure at which you should be starting your ascent. In this case, you want to start ascending the boat mooring line with at least 70 bar or 800 psi remaining. Take 70 bar or 800 psi from your starting pressure, and that means you have 130 bar or 2200 psi for the dive itself, and you agree to head out until one of you has used half of this, 65 bar or 1100 psi. Then you'll head back using the other half. So, to find your turn pressure, the SPG pressure at which you turn around and head back, subtract 65 bar or 1100 psi from your starting pressure. In this case, your turn pressure is 135 bar or 1900 psi. This gets you back to the mooring line and back on the surface with your reserve. When you plan conservatively, it's common to reach your ascent point with more air than planned. If so, you can often continue the dive in the immediate area, then surface when you reach your ascent pressure. With conservative planning, unexpected delays will still usually let you reach your ascent point within your air supply limits. But if not, ascend as planned where you are and swim the rest of the way on the surface. Do not risk running out of air underwater. A final point: to adjust for differences in air supplies and starting pressures, plan air management based on the smallest supply. At the beginning and end of a dive, you commonly spend time at the surface in water too deep in which to stand. As you've learned, maintain a habit of keeping your mask on and breathing from your snorkel or regulator. Under stress, you tend to do what you do by habit, so these are the habits you want. You may prevent and handle difficulties more effectively when you can see and breathe with your face in the water. You respond much more slowly if you have to put your mask back on. With your mask on and a mouthpiece in place, you're less likely to be blinded or choked a bit by waves. And you're less likely to lose a mask that's on your face. Talk as necessary, but put your mouthpiece back in your mouth afterwards. If you're at the surface more than a few moments at the start of a dive, use your snorkel to save your air for the dive. At the end of a dive with a low cylinder, you may need your snorkel to breathe with your face in the water while swimming or in choppy conditions. When you have to get in the water some distance from where you want to dive, it's common to save air by using your snorkel on the surface to get there. You may snorkel as you look for your descent point from the surface. If you surface away from your exit point due to low air, you may have no choice but to make a surface swim. For short swims, or so you can see underwater, swim face down. But for long swims, it's less tiring on your back because the water supports the cylinder weight, though it's a little harder to navigate and watch where you're going. Maintain the buddy system. Communicate and stay together. Generally, it works well to swim side by side, like this. When you're ready to descend, you follow 5 steps. First, confirm your buddy is ready to descend. Then second, orient yourselves to something at the surface or underwater. Third, switch to your regulator. And fourth, Check your computer to be sure it's operational and hasn't gone into sleep mode. Activate your timer if you're using one. Fifth, signal descent and slowly deflate your BCD to start down together. As you start down, begin equalizing immediately and equalize frequently, every meter or few feet, as you learned previously. Descend with your head above your feet, like this, to help your orientation and equalization. You often have a line or slope as a reference. Usually, you use it as a visual reference and control your descent by controlling your buoyancy. But you may hold on to it in some circumstances, like diving in a current. When descending without a reference, stay in a buddy team, adjust your buoyancy, and control your descent by watching your computer. As you descend, your buoyancy decreases and you start to sink faster. This is because increased pressure compresses the gas in your exposure suit and it loses buoyancy. Add air to your BCD to compensate for this, or to your dry suit if you're wearing one. Use small, frequent adjustments for a slow, controlled descent. This helps you equalize every meter or few feet. Ideally, you arrive at the bottom neutrally buoyant by adjusting as you descend. Starting an ascent also has 5 steps. 1. Confirm your buddy is ready to ascend. 2. Check your computer to be sure you're within its limits. 3. Look up and hold your BCD deflator. Do not add air to your BCD. If you're properly weighted and neutrally buoyant, start your ascent by swimming up gently. 4. Ascend slowly, no faster than 18 meters or 60 feet per minute, or your computer's rate, whichever is slower. With most computers, your ascent rate is 10 meters or 30 feet per minute. Look up and turn as you ascend to make sure there's nothing above you. Reach up as you near and break through the surface. Check your computer and control your buoyancy to control your ascent rate. Your buoyancy increases as you ascend because air in your BCD and exposure suit expands. Control your buoyancy by releasing air from your BCD or dry suit if you're wearing one in small amounts frequently. When possible, ascend with your buddy or buddies along a reference, like a sloping bottom, mooring line, or a vertical line from a boat or float. Again, you normally use it as a visual reference, though you may ascend holding onto a line in situations like currents. You can ascend in mid-water without a reference by controlling your buoyancy and watching your depth and descent rate on your computer. To navigate while doing this, a common technique is for one buddy to control the ascent while another buddy focuses on navigation. Make a safety stop a normal part of your ascents. It's simply a pause somewhere between 6 meters or 20 feet and 3 meters or 10 feet, usually at 5 meters or 15 feet, for 3 to 5 minutes. Safety stops help you stabilize your ascent and give your body extra time to release dissolved gases. This helps reduce the risk of lung overexpansion injuries and decompression sickness. You'll learn more about this in sections 4 and 5. It's easiest to make safety stops with a reference, but you can make them without one by watching your depth on your computer while hovering, neutrally buoyant. Note that safety stops add conservatism, but you omit them during emergencies like assisting another diver or if you are very low on air. After all divers confirm they've completed their safety stop, swim gently upward to resume your ascent. Look up and reach up, like this, and rotate if necessary to check for obstructions. Keep a hand up as you surface, then inflate your BCD so you float comfortably before you switch to your snorkel. When boat diving, you usually signal the dive master that you're okay, then swim toward the boat if you're some distance away. You wear exposure suits for warmth and to provide some protection from accidental stings, scrapes, and cuts. The three primary types are wetsuits, dry suits, and skin suits, which are sometimes called bodysuits. You use wetsuits in water as cold as 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. They're made of foam neoprene. Water seeps into the suit and gets trapped, which is why they're called wetsuits. Afterward, your body heats the water, and the neoprene slows further heat loss significantly. A wetsuit has to fit properly, because if it's too loose, water flows in and out, taking away body heat. Too tight, and it's not comfortable. So, be sure to get a professional fitting. Dry suits cover most or all of your body, and you use them in water cooler than 18 degrees Celsius or 65 degrees Fahrenheit, but also for very long dives in warmer water. As the name says, the suit keeps you dry. An undergarment and an air layer, and sometimes the suit itself, insulate you. Because a dry suit is an airspace, you equalize it and adjust it for buoyancy control when you change depths. You learn to do this in the PADI Dry Suit Diver course, and your instructor will familiarize you with dry suit operation if you use one in this course. Dry suits don't fit snugly, but size, fit, and options are still important. Skin suits provide some sting, cut, scrape, and sunburn protection, but little or no insulation. You wear them by themselves in very warm water, or under a partial wetsuit in moderately warm water. Many divers wear skin suits to help them put on wetsuits. Exposure suits come in different styles, and you can choose from different accessories and options. Wet and dry suits insulate you so effectively that overheating can be an issue when it's hot out. Avoid this by setting up your kit before putting on your suit, and put the suit on at the last possible moment. Stay in the shade if possible. Limit activity as much as you can, especially when you have to be in the sun. Pull back a hood and unzip the jacket for as long as possible. If you do start to overheat, stop and cool off, even if it holds up the dive a few minutes. You carry a cutting tool for safety, such as to deal with entanglement, and for convenience, such as to remove litter from a dive site. You can choose from 4 basic types, though some areas regulate the types and sizes of cutting devices. Dive knives range in size and usually have a smooth and serrated cutting edge. Dive tools are similar, but they replace the pointed tip with a prying tip. Shears are especially suited to cutting line and net. And Z-knives are bladed hooks specifically for cutting fishing net or line. You usually carry a Z-knife in addition to a regular knife or tool. You mount cutting tools in different places based on what you like, as shown. Wear at least one someplace you can reach it with either hand, so it's accessible even if you have an arm a bit tangled in something. You need a dive gear bag to carry all your equipment, except weights, cylinders, and dry suits. They're designed specifically for diving so that salt water won't ruin zippers, so the material won't rot, and so they can withstand the stresses carrying it. You can choose from many styles, options, and colors, which are mainly personal preference. The main thing to pay attention to is size. Select a bag that is slightly larger than what you think you will need, because your kit tends to grow as you gain experience. As a diver, there are 3 primary instruments you use: your SPG, dive computer, and compass. These may be separate instruments, or 2 or all 3 may integrate into a single one. You're already familiar with SPGs. Dive computers track your depth, time, and give you time limits. You'll learn about these in sections 4 and 5. Your compass gives directional information so you can find your way. You'll learn about doing this a bit later as well. Besides these, there are optional instruments. Before dive computers, divers used depth gauges and watches for use with dive tables. You will need these if you use the RDP table or ERDPML instead of a computer. Dive watches are popular lifestyle accessories, the badge of a diver, if you will. Many divers who have computers also have dive watches for that reason, as well as having another way to time their dives. Thermometers help you learn how much exposure protection to use. Although you can get a separate thermometer, your SPG or dive computer may already have one. Dive instruments are robust, but shield them from impact and don't drop them. Keep them out of prolonged exposure to direct sunlight and high heat. Other than rinsing instruments, the primary special care is changing the batteries as directed by the manufacturer. See the manufacturer literature for any additional requirements. You'll learn several ways to enter the water during this course. Depending upon your physical characteristics, one you may learn is the giant stride, which is popular when diving from large dive boats or from docks onto deep water. After your pre-dive safety check, with your buddy, go to the water entry area. To avoid walking with fins on, put on your fins there if you can. You can stabilize each other or hang on to something stable. Partially inflate your BCD. Check that the entry area is clear and confirm that your buddy's ready. Breathe from your regulator and hold it and your mask like this, so they don't get bumped out of place when you splash. You can hold your instruments and accessories with the other hand. However, some divers prefer to put it on the back of their head. Look straight ahead and take a big step into the water. Keep holding your mask and regulator until you're stable on the surface. Turn to the boat or dock, poolside in this case. Signal that you're okay and clear the area for your buddy. Boat diving, you typically wait on a line trailing from near the ladder or the stern if there's a bit of a current. You use a weight check at the surface to determine proper weighting. Starting with your estimated weight, breathe from your regulator and deflate your BCD completely. Holding a normal breath, you should float at eye level. And when you exhale, you should sink slowly. If not, add or remove weight until you do. Once you're there, if you're wearing a full cylinder, add about 2 kilograms or 5 pounds. This is because the air in your cylinder has weight, and you get lighter as you use it up. The 2 kilograms or 5 pounds offsets this weight change. Sometimes a BCD band is too loose and the cylinder starts to slip. If this happens before getting into the water, it's usually simplest to take the scuba kit off and readjust it. If a cylinder comes loose during the dive, it's not usually an emergency because it will stay with the diver. Find some sand or other insensitive bottom and have her turn face down, like this. Loosen the band enough to replace the cylinder. Then tighten and lock it. If it comes loose at the surface, you may be able to re-secure it by having the diver hold on to something while breathing from her snorkel or regulator. It's usually easiest if the diver has no more air in the BCD than necessary to float. If a cylinder slips loose while exiting the water, it is often easiest to ease back into the water, slip the kit off, and then lift it from the water like this. You'll practice taking your gear off in the water at the surface so you can do this. When your snorkel's out of your mouth at the surface, it fills with water. To clear it so you can breathe, blow forcefully like this to blast the water out. You'll hear this called the blast method. After clearing, inhale cautiously and use airway control to breathe past any residual water and blast again to get rid of it. Practice this with your face in the water, which is how you do it when you're keeping an eye on something below, or when in choppy waves that, for practical purposes, mean that your face is always in the water. You switch from your snorkel to your regulator, and your regulator to your snorkel on almost every dive. Again, practice this with your face in the water. Starting with your snorkel, take a breath, then exchange it for your regulator. Clear your regulator. After a few breaths, take a breath, go back to your snorkel, clear it, and breathe. Repeat this exchange until you can do it effortlessly. During Confined Water Dive 2, you'll begin developing your neutral buoyancy skills. One popular technique for starting out is the fin pivot. Lie face down on insensitive bottom, sand, for example, if you're not in a pool. Relax, then breathe slowly and deeply. If you're approximately neutrally buoyant, you should pivot up on your fin tips as you inhale and down as you exhale. If you don't, add a small burst to your BCD and try again. Make small changes. Adding a lot of air risks a rapid ascent. Be patient. When you pivot up and down as you breathe, like this, you're about neutral. Once you know how to do this, start using neutral buoyancy as your normal state while diving. For example, if you need to clear your mask, instead of kneeling, clear it in mid-water or with just light fin tip contact, in a more horizontal position, like this. Although the fin pivot is popular, your instructor may have you use a different technique. Confined Water Dive 2 continues your mask clearing skills. You'll start by clearing a fully flooded mask, which you do just like a partially flooded one, like this. Then, you take off your mask completely. This prepares you in case it were to get dislodged completely while diving. If you're not wearing contacts, keep your eyes open. Everything will be blurry, but you'll see well enough to swim, signal your buddy, and so on. If you find it uncomfortable to breathe with your nose exposed to water at first, block it momentarily if necessary. But with a little practice, you'll be able to breathe without a mask and without blocking it. You'll practice doing this for a minute or more, which is about how long it would take to reach the surface if you lost your mask and couldn't find it. After a minute, put it back on and clear it. Then, check the seal for trapped hair or your hood under it, which would allow an annoying drizzle until corrected. A rare but possible malfunction is for your BCD or dry suit inflator to stick open. Respond by disconnecting it and venting the excess air. To start the exercise, your instructor may simulate the sticking by holding down the inflation button. Immediately disconnect the hose from the inflator, like this. It takes more effort with your regulator pressurized. Push the hose toward the connection, like this, while pulling back on the release fitting with your fingers. If you can't disconnect quickly, get relatively vertical and hold open the exhaust, like this, so you can keep your buoyancy under control while continuing to disconnect the hose. After you're finished practicing, be sure to reconnect the inflator hose. During Confined Water Dive 3, you'll learn to inflate your BCD without low-pressure inflation from your cylinder. You're better able to respond appropriately if you know what it feels like to run out of air. Your instructor will simulate this by closing your cylinder valve while you breathe and watch your SPG. Note that the pressure drops with each breath, and you'll feel breathing become noticeably difficult. When you can't get a breath, signal out of air, and your instructor will reopen your valve. You'll see your SPG return to its previous reading, and you can resume breathing. Good divers know their approximate remaining air at all times. To help you develop this ability, at times your instructor will, without prior notice, ask you to signal your air pressure without rechecking your SPG, after which you'll check together. If you're managing your air supply and monitoring your SPG as you should be within 20 bar or 300 psi. One of the exits you may learn is the ladder exit. This is a common technique when diving from larger boats. Surface near but not too close to the ladder area. If there's another diver ahead of you, don't get right under her. The diver could fall back in, or her cylinder could slip loose. If there's a current, you usually have a line to hang on to until it's your turn. When it is, approach the ladder and grab it firmly. Keep your mask on so you can see above and below the surface, and switch back to your regulator so you can breathe if you were to fall back in. Then, while keeping contact with the ladder, hand up any accessories, then remove and hand up your fins. Some divers slip adjustable fins onto their wrists, like this, so they have them to swim with if they lose their grip and get pushed away by the current. Breathe from your regulator until you're all the way aboard, and immediately take a seat and have a buddy help you get your gear off. Depending upon the boat, the ladder, surface conditions, and your physical characteristics, you may hand up your weights or your entire scuba kit before climbing the ladder. Some divers can't climb ladders at all and use different exit techniques.